It's 2 o'clock, so I will giddy up with the presentation because I have a lot to cover in the next 20 minutes with you guys. So first of all, thank you so much to torontojobs.ca for inviting me to speak today, and to all of you for joining me for this speaking session. My name is Rachel Despres, and I am a career coach for rebels. So I specialize in helping people to break free of their cubicles and create unconventional careers that truly fit with who they are. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you guys about today: careers outside of the cubicle. Now, the shift toward careers outside of the cubicle has been taking place for quite some time now. But with the pandemic, that shift has been just rapidly accelerated. And in a lot of cases, it'll be a permanent shift. So either businesses will move toward having people work from home for good, or at least most of the time, so that it would just be like a flexible working environment. Or you might have been the one who's decided over this around 6 months that you've been working from home that you have exactly zero interest in going back to the cubicle after you've enjoyed working from home for so long. So this shift away from the cubicle has shifted rapidly and will likely be something that will be around on a permanent basis going forward. Now, before I dive into the presentation content today, I want to ask all of you a question. When you were a kid, did you dream of growing up and working in a cubicle? Did you think to yourself, yes, you know what I want to do when I grow up? I want to push paper at a desk. Type yes in the chat if that was your dream career when you were a kid. I'm curious if anybody dreamt of growing up and working in a cubicle. I've got a lot of no's, not at all. Yeah, I hear you. Every time I ask this question, I mostly get crickets, or like you guys are saying, a lot of hard no's. And if you did, if you were one of those people who did have a little bit of a dream to work in an office, I know when I was a kid, I used to play office with my cousins all the time. And it was because we had parents and grandparents who worked in that type of environment. And our admiration of them is what made us want to do what they were doing for a career, even if we didn't know exactly what they were doing. We just thought they were punching things into a calculator and printing things out on a computer. We didn't know what they did, right? So, it's on the whole, it's very likely that your little kid dreams of your grown-up career were going to be way bigger than working in a cubicle for 40 plus hours a week, and likely a lot more exciting too. So why is it then that so many of us end up working in cubicles? Well, I think it's because we're not really told that there are other options out there. Sure, I mean, you can look out in the world and you can see that there are other options out there, like being an astronaut or being a pro athlete or an actor. But those paths are considered to be quite rare, and the people who do them are often labeled as being special. So the safe route for the rest of us is to go get a desk job because they're everywhere. They're a dime a dozen. They're not hard to find. But the thing is that working in a desk job is not for everyone. It doesn't fit with everyone's personal needs or lifestyle or aspirations. And if a desk job isn't for you, and since you're joining me on this speaking session, I'm betting you got a little bit of an inkling that it's not for you. You might be feeling maybe like there's something wrong with you for not being happy with a normal job. But because you don't know of any other options that exist out there, you're probably feeling pretty stuck. How do I know these things? Because I was once in the same place that you are right now. When I graduated from university, I spent the first 6 years of my career working in cubicles before I escaped and created my own career. And now I help other people to do the same thing. And today we're going to talk about your options beyond the cubicle, because you do have some. and how to know which of these types of unconventional careers might be the right fit for you. And we're also going to highlight some of the benefits to pursuing an unconventional career, because there are lots of those, and that's often what attracts people to pursuing unconventional careers, are the benefits. So I have another question for you. When I say the term unconventional career, what do you think of? Let me know in the chat what comes to mind for you when I say the words unconventional career. I'm curious what that brings up for you. I'll give you guys a second to type your answers in. Low paying, interesting. Remote, social impact, creativity, not the same format of work as traditional work, self-employed. Yeah. Unconventional is something that's unrelated to one's field, possibly, although not necessarily. Passionate, ability to work anywhere, innovative. Yeah, not a career path the regular person would be willing to follow. Now, the interesting thing is that on the whole, most of your answers are totally right in the fact that there's no one definition of what an unconventional career is, because that word unconventional means different things to different people. But I've noticed over the time that I have been coaching people to create unconventional careers that most of them tend to fall within three main categories. So the first category, and somebody already mentioned it, is self-employment. So this means working for yourself, whether it's on a full-time basis or a part-time basis. So when I say part-time basis, I mean having a side business, a side gig, a side hustle, something like that. I'm sure you've probably heard those terms before. The side hustle is often where people start, and then they will eventually grow it into a full-time business, or that's their intention when they start their side hustle, is that they want to eventually grow it into a side business. It's also one of the easiest places to start if you're looking to move away from working for somebody else, is starting a side business, because you can do it as slowly and as gradually as you want. You don't have to plunge right into self-employment. You can take it as easy as you want to. So I know what a lot of people do is they'll start a side business and then they'll wait until they've had their side business for a certain amount of time, or until the side business starts bringing in a certain amount of income before they either scale back the hours that they're working at their full-time job, or they just let go of the full-time job completely and go full into self-employment. Now, a side hustle is something that a lot of people are looking at exploring, especially right now, given the current climate as a result of the pandemic. And the reason that is because if there's anything that this pandemic has highlighted, it's the fact that job stability, it virtually doesn't exist, right? You can lose your job at any given moment. So I was reading an article recently, and the title was "Side Hustles Are the New Job Stability." And I think that's a really interesting kind of perspective, because a lot of people are now saying, okay, I'll have a full-time job, but I'm going to have a business on the side too. I'm going to diversify my income streams so that if I happen to lose my full-time job, which is something that's out of my control, I still can have a business and have an income that's within my control. So side hustles are gaining a lot of traction right now. Self-employment, I've noticed, it's interesting because self-employment is often painted as being risky because it's less common than traditional employment or desk job type of work. But the truth is that every single business that exists in the world was once someone's foray into self-employment. I'm sure you guys have seen that picture floating around the internet of Jeff Bezos back in like the 1990s with like his giant monitor on his computer and a spray painted Amazon sign stuck to his wall. Because back in the day, back in the 90s, Amazon was just Jeff's, side business. It was the thing that he was working on. It didn't employ thousands of people. It wasn't a massive multinational corporation like it is now. It once started just as his, little side project, little business, and it's grown into what it is now. So in effect, our entire economy is built on self-employment. And interestingly, a lot of common careers actually fall under the self-employment category. Things like massage therapists and chiropractors, dentists, naturopaths, hairstylists. But we often forget or maybe overlook the fact that these people are self-employed because self-employment is so commonly associated with these career paths that we don't really consider them to be self-employed, but they are. So what I'm hoping you're gathering is that self-employment is far more prevalent in the working world than we tend to give it credit for. And it's certainly not as risky as it is often painted to be. But self-employment can range from anything from providing services, like some of the services I just mentioned, like naturopath and dentist, massage therapist, to creating a product. So maybe it's something, simple like creating candles, or maybe you make pet products, or maybe you are an artist and the thing that you create is like a sculpture or a painting or music. So it can be widely diverse in what it is that you offer when you create your own business or your own side hustle. So how do you know if the self-employment path is the right one for you? Well, more than skills, because skills can be learned, you need to have certain traits or characteristics. So you have to have a spirit of independence, right? You want to run the show. You want to call the shots and make your own rules. You are often very self-driven or self-motivated, and you are very persistent, which really just means you're stubborn, because you have to be stubborn to push your business forward and keep it moving forward over time. And you might even have the desire to one day employ other people, although not necessarily, because you can also pursue what's called solopreneurship, where you are the sole employee of your business. That's the type of business that I have. I am the only employee of my business. So you might have the desire to one day employ other people and grow the business into a team, or you might desire to just keep it, you keep it just you, yourself, and like a lone wolf kind of operation. So self-employment is the first type of unconventional career category. The second one is gig work. So this is having multiple part-time jobs that make up a full-time work or full-time income. Now, gigs may be a combination of working for employers and working for yourself. Or you might have gigs where you're entirely working for other people, or gigs where you're entirely working for yourself. So you can be one or the other, or a combination of both, whatever works best for you. Now, this type of career path is gaining a lot of traction as we move toward the gig economy. And I'm sure you've probably heard that term, gig economy, but maybe you're not totally sure what it means. So by definition, the gig economy is one in which temporary, flexible jobs are commonplace, and companies tend toward hiring independent contractors and freelancers instead of full-time employees. If you have been active in applying in the job market over the last, say, 5 or so years, you've probably already noticed this, the fact that very few companies hire people full-time right out of the gate now. They'll take you on as contract first, and then they might extend you full-time employee after a period of time. But what's happening even more commonly now is that companies are just extending the contract or renewing the contract, but they are not necessarily ever going to offer you a full-time position within the company. And that's going to become more and more prevalent as we shift toward the gig economy. Now, that term gig economy and the way it's often used makes it sound like it's quite far out, like it's a futuristic term and we're not there yet. We're not on our way there, or we're on our way there, but we're not there yet. But you might be interested to learn that actually 20 to 30% of the Canadian workforce is already doing non-traditional work, like freelancing, independent contractors, and consultants. So even though gig work might seem like it's not that common, or it's a really like new trend in the job market, there's actually a very large portion of the job market that's already pursuing that kind of work. So how do you know if gig work is the right fit for you? Well, you're going to have a lot of the same qualities that I mentioned when it came to self-employment. And that's because in a lot of cases, self-employment is a component of or the entirety of your gig work career. So you're going to have that spirit of independence. You're going to be self-driven and self-motivated, want to call the shots and make your own rules, and maybe or maybe not want to employ people. But there's actually one distinct difference between people who want to pursue gig work versus people who want to pursue self-employment, and that is variety. Gig workers love variety. So if you know that about yourself, if you know you like, spinning lots of plates and doing lots of things, then gig work might feel like a better fit for you versus self-employment. Because most people who pursue self-employment tend to put all of their time, effort, and energy into pursuing one pursuit, right? One business. Whereas gig workers often will split their time, effort, and energy into multiple things. So for instance, with a gig worker, they might have one gig where they make, gourmet cookies, and then another gig where they do pet sitting and dog walking. And then another gig of theirs is building websites for people. So the gigs can be widely diverse and can tap into different interests that you have as a person. Whereas in entrepreneurship or in self-employment, a lot of that time, effort, and energy tends to be funneled into doing one thing, pursuing one type of business. So that's the biggest distinction, is variety in gig work versus focus or, specialization, so to speak, when it comes to self-employment. So that's the second type of unconventional career path. The third is remote work. So this means working for an employer outside of an office environment. Now, this is far more common now than it used to be, even just a few years ago when I started career coaching. But it's something that almost everyone has been thrust into since March with the pandemic. But what I'm gathering from people is that a lot of people are really digging it. They're really loving this whole work from home thing, and they don't really want to go back. So that type is one of the most common. It's one of the most common types of remote work, where you're doing more conventional desk job type of work, but you just have the freedom to choose where you'd like to do it from. So right now we don't have as much freedom. We're more or less confined to our home offices. But say a couple of years down the road, when we're on the other side of the pandemic, or at least in a situation where there are less restrictions, you'll probably have the freedom to choose between working from home or working from a cafe, or, like traveling the world while you're working, right? That's a dream for a lot of people, is to travel while they're working. And the beauty thing about unconventional careers is that you can do that with all of them, whether you're self-employed, doing gig work, or doing remote work. You definitely have the option to travel the world while you're working. But there's another type of remote work that I want to mention, and that's where you're doing unconventional work in an unconventional setting. So for an example, working outdoors, like say at a conservation area or an animal sanctuary. You're decidedly not doing anything that you would typically do in a desk job, right? And you're also doing it in an unconventional environment, like outdoors instead of indoors in an office. Or maybe like working on a movie set. I've had a number of clients who have either come from that industry or move into that industry, where, instead of working at a desk, they're operating a camera or setting up props or doing costumes, right? So they're doing unconventional work in an unconventional environment. So how do you know if this is the right path for you, if remote work is the right unconventional career for you? Well, you like the perks of an unconventional career, which we're going to talk about in a second, but you aren't interested in running your own show. You don't want to be the boss. You don't want to call the shots or make the rules. But you also really value certain aspects of conventional work, like consistent working hours and a biweekly paycheck, benefits, having a set number of hours of vacation time, that kind of thing. So just to recap, the three types of unconventional careers, or the categories, are self-employment, gig work, and remote work. Those are the three main types of unconventional careers that you could pursue. Now, I'm curious, based on the information that I just shared, which type of unconventional career do you think might be the best one for you? In the chat box, type 1 for self-employment, type 2 for gig work, and type 3 for remote work. And I also want to mention too that there's no saying you can't do more than one of these things. Someone already said 2 or 3, 1/3, right? You can definitely do more than one of these things. There's no saying that you have to choose one in particular. You can definitely have a remote work career and then also pursue a side hustle on the side kind of thing. So I'm seeing a lot of, well, it's pretty split. 2, 2, 2 or 3, 1, 3, 2, couple of slashes, 2 and 3. Love it. All right, so let's quickly talk about the benefits, because this is one of the things that attracts a lot of people to careers outside the cubicle are the benefits. So they're largely tied to what a person values the most, but the most common benefits I hear are freedom. Freedom is the number one thing I hear. And it's actually my why for why I pursued self-employment a number of years ago, is that I wanted freedom. So when people say freedom, they often mean freedom from routine, from working 9 to 5 every day, from, freedom to choose where you would like to do your work from. And then a close second to freedom is flexibility. So this is flexibility to build your own schedule, to work on what you want to work on, like choosing your own projects, and also when you want to work on the things you want to work on. You get to decide how that fits into your schedule and into your life. Autonomy is also a big one. So a lot of people are attracted to being able to work by themselves or not being reliant on other people to do their work. And if you are a multi-passionate or a multi-potentialite, people who like to have a lot of variety and pursue a lot of different pursuits, this is one of the perks of having an unconventional career, is that you have the ability to do that. You're no longer boxed in by a rigid job description. You can pursue lots of different interests at the same time. So this is especially true of people who are self-employed or are pursuing gig work, because if you do have a remote work career, you will still have some kind of job description that you're fulfilling. And then the last major or most common benefit of pursuing unconventional careers is the ability to wear many hats. So a lot of people love the challenge of constantly trying and learning new things and juggling a bunch of things at the same time, especially when you're starting out as someone who's self-employed or pursuing gig work. You're going to be doing all the things, right? You'll be doing the bookkeeping and the marketing and the sales and the actual work itself. You'll be wearing many hats. And for some people, they've been a specialist for so long that they love the idea of dabbling in a bunch of different things. So that is another major perk for people. So that is the lowdown on careers outside of the cubicle. I would love to turn it over to questions now. So feel free to put some in the chat if you have any. But I did want to mention that if what I've talked about today is interested you, if you are thinking about wanting to move in the direction of an unconventional career, but maybe you're just not sure how to go about it or what you'd actually want to do. Like today, we've talked a lot about what some options are for different paths, but maybe now you're like, okay, I definitely want to do gig work, but I don't know what the heck I would actually want to do. I am running a free 5-day challenge in September called Ditch Your Desk Job to help you figure out these exact things so that you can stay out of that cubicle for good. So you can not ever have to go back to the all beige everything office that you were used to before. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, I will put the sign up link in the chat. So feel free to join. You can check out the page and learn more about the challenge, or you can sign up there. And I'll also drop my contact information in the chat as well. So feel free to connect with me after the presentation today. If you have any other questions, or if you would like me to elaborate on anything that I talked about today, I would be happy to answer any of your questions. So yeah, let's have a look and see if there are any questions in here. Scroll back up. Are there some dedicated job searching sites you'd recommend to find gig jobs? So it's going to largely depend on what it is that you want to do. So a lot of gig jobs are now being posted on traditional job platforms, things like Indeed or Workopolis and those types of platforms. They'll just generally be they'll call them part-time, right? So if it's a part-time job, it's technically a gig, because anything that's not a full-time job is considered to be a gig. So they'll probably look like that on traditional job searching sites. Depending on what it is that you want to do, though, like if it's some kind of like a creative service, or you offer like a technological service like building websites or doing development and stuff like that, you can check on or you can basically offer your services on sites like Fiverr, or Upwork is another big one. And then depending on what you want to do. So like if you're freelance writing, for instance, there are lots of different sites that are specific for that type of gig. So if you search like freelance writing databases or freelance writing job boards and stuff like that, there'll be lots of things listed there. But it's going to largely depend on what kind of gig you want to do. Some are in plain sight, and then some you have to dig a little bit more to find. Okay, so Elizabeth asks, I'm new to Toronto. What are some of the best platforms you would recommend to advertise your side hustle? I'm a freelance makeup artist and stylist, for reference. Honestly, Elizabeth, I think social media is going to be your best friend, especially like Facebook and Instagram. Less so LinkedIn, just because people aren't necessarily looking to acquire services like that on LinkedIn. But certainly, if people are looking for makeup artists or stylists, they're definitely looking on platforms like that. Pinterest might be a great option for you as well, since that's how a lot of people like dream up like weddings or birthday parties and things like that. All right, just searching through to see if there are any other questions. Yeah, and then somebody else asked, what are the best sites for remote work? So a lot of the same things I just mentioned before, like Indeed and the traditional job searching sites, and then also look for job boards that are specifically related to the work that you know that you want to do. Are there any other questions? We've got a couple minutes left. I'd be happy to answer them. Does anybody have any questions about the presentation, or about something that they're thinking about pursuing, or about the Ditch Your Desk Job Challenge? I'd be happy to answer anything else. You guys are pretty quiet. Was this helpful? Was it inspiring? Please feel free to let me know if it resonated with you and you feel really excited about the opportunities that are available outside of the cubicle, because there are lots of them. I'm a CA by profession, looking for a job currently. I speak French and English. Can I do a gig with language? Do you mean like offering language services as a gig, or do you mean can you do gigs in different languages? Like teaching? Yes, certainly. I mean, teaching is a little bit more of a conventional type of career path. So you might have a harder time teaching like in a conventional sense. You might have to look at teaching at places like one of the learning centers like Kumon or Sylvan Learning, or you could also look at teaching at private schools, college and universities too. Like if you're a college or university professor, those are very much gigs. They're certainly not full-time jobs unless you're a tenured professor, which are rare positions. So the woman who built my website, she's actually also a college prof. She teaches graphic design in college as well. So she's a gig worker. She has her own business, and then she works as a college prof. So you can certainly do teaching as a gig. It's just that you might have to look outside of like the traditional version of teaching to find gigs in teaching. Yeah, Megan says one of my friends does a lot of side gigs with her fluency in multiple languages. Absolutely. That's a huge thing now, especially as people are looking to make their content more accessible. And online businesses, you can operate in any country, really. So they're looking to have their content translated. So absolutely, there's a lot of potential there. Does YouTube and other video streaming platforms fall into gigs? Certainly, absolutely. I mean, if you build it up to a point where you're actually drawing an income from it, then it would definitely be considered a side gig. If it's just something that you do for fun, but you're not necessarily pulling an income from it, then it would fall into more of the hobby category. What's your recommendation for job seekers outside Canada to work inside and relocate? I might not be the best person to talk to you about that. I'm certain there are other career professionals presenting today who will know a lot more about that, about relocation. But if you are thinking about starting a business in Canada when you move here, then I would highly recommend checking out. The government of Canada has lots of resources on starting businesses. And then depending on where you're looking to relocate, like if you're moving to Toronto, for instance, Toronto is going to have a small business development center, and they will have plenty of resources to help you start a business local to Toronto. So check there. What category does e-commerce and MLM fall? Well, MLM is probably more of a gig because for a lot of you, it's not your business. You're just participating in a larger business. It's something that you do on the side to make a little bit of income. And then e-commerce is likely going to fall into self-employment. Although for some people it could be a gig, right? They might sell. Like I have a friend who works full time, but then she has a side gig selling art prints and pins and like plush animals and things like that. So for her, it's a side gig. But for some people, they might have, that might be part of their gig-based career where like one of the things they do is e-commerce, and then they have other services as well, or other products as well that are not e-commerce. All right. Well, I'll close it out and just say thank you again, you guys, for joining me for the presentation today. Like I said, please feel free to connect either here on Hopin or on LinkedIn or Instagram, or send me an email. I'll be hanging around for the rest of the day. So if you would like to chat, feel free to send me a private message as well. And yeah, I would thank you again. And please let me know if you have any other questions. And I hope to see you at the Ditch Your Desk Job Challenge coming up in September. All right. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.